Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with Peter Scalzo, our host and everything cancer and peace expert, with newly revised and updated website also. So if you haven't been there in a while, check it out because you made some revisions. Him and producer Jack were doing something over there today. And I was going, okay, that's good. That's true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything's updated.
Factual stuff.
Yeah,
so had to revise it.
Yeah. I wonder if you actually show up on Chat GPT now if I were to ask some questions about.
Really?
I'm curious. Yeah.
I don't know, chat.
We should try that. Huh. Anyway, let's get to our topic. Yeah,
Okay.
Producer Jack's going like, speed
let's
it up
go.
here. This
Let's
has
do it.
nothing
It's
to
a great
do.
topic today.
All right. Peter is excited about our topic today.
Yeah.
And Producer Jack wanted him to do the setup, and he wanted me to do the setup. So I'm going to give just a blurb, and then I'm going to turn it over to Peter to give a little bit more. And the thoughts that we want to, or the basic topic is about the mystery of God or mystery in our lives. And so as you think about our culture today, we tend to try to take mystery out of everything. We have this idea of science, I follow the science, and it's as if we've taken mystery out of everything. And Peter and I are going to talk about the perspective of embracing mystery. And the setup I have really is embracing what we would call the confusing in-between or the great unknown. And I think that confusing in-between came from Scazzero's work, I believe, is where I really first started hearing that. Yeah. And I really liked it because so much of life is embracing this confusing in-between. And I think the more you embrace it, the more you can experience peace. And that's why we want to talk about it for the cancer journey. So that's my brief setup.
Yeah, that's great, Sean. Scazzero calls it the holy unknowing. And I just like that because it describes that the fact that there's this, I don't have knowledge of what God is doing, but there's something holy about that is a precious thing. We don't like to think of it that way, at least I don't. What it means for me is I can't control God. God's going to do what God's going to do. And the issue is, for me, the question is, am I willing to wait upon God and to trust and surrender in him, even though I think there should be a different result, or even though I don't think I should have to wait? My cancer journey is full of the periods of waiting and trusting and not understanding. Definitely not understanding. I mean, it's been a 6 recurrence journey. So even just after those events, it's the Lord, what are you doing? What's happening? Why is this going on this way? So I think you and I were discussing it before this episode, and the fact that we both said that our Western culture rejects the idea of the mystery of God or even mystery like that. And yet in Christianity, Christendom, so much of what we do and know is full of mystery, right?
As you're thinking about it and just talking, there's a couple of thoughts that have come into mind, and it's not just Western culture. I was thinking, we put it in Western culture, and we've really worked hard to try to take out as much mystery as possible. And I think we're an explorer culture too. We want to, explore the depths of, the finest detail and molecular biology or whatever it is you might be thinking about. And then for space, we're looking as deep as we can to try to understand and explain the mystery that's out there. And so I see that happening. And then I was just thinking, well, the story of Job, what happened there was people came along and tried to explain and take away the mystery because it wasn't revealed what was going on. Why was Job suffering? And it appears unjustly suffering in his life.
Yeah.
And just as we're talking about it, just hit me. It's like, these 3 friends came along and tried to take out the mystery of God in there, or the mystery of life, even in suffering, the mystery of suffering. And they tried to put pat explanations around it that, well, the reason why you're suffering obviously is because of, and in this case, you've done something wrong. You've sinned in some way. You've created for yourself a mess. And so now you're going to suffer for it. as opposed to embracing suffering. And so that
Mm-hmm.
just struck me as we were saying that. And so now I'm sure as a cancer patient, those questions come to us like, why am I suffering? Why has this happened?
Right.
There's some of that that's going on. And so those are thoughts that immediately came to mind as we were talking about this.
Yeah, in the cancer context, in fact, there's been 3 memorial services recently. I think maybe even over the past weekend that we just went through, and in each case there was an element of, well, God's going to do a physical healing, and what happened was each person passed,
Yeah.
and so it's, it's what happens as a cancer patient when
That's an example you think of not embracing the mystery
yeah
and trying to put, hey, this is black and
yes.
white, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You feel that way at times. Is that why we see a lot of, yeah, go ahead. I actually want to comment on that a
that's
little
a
bit.
good point. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was listening to a podcast and it was a chaplain who worked at a hospital and he's seen so much death. And one of the key things he talked about seeing was exactly what you're talking about. It was this idea that people could not sit in the mystery. They had to put black and white explanations up on it. And so,
Right.
I think there is something, and it may be, he describes something that he feels like we see much more in our culture. And that is an unwillingness to, like it was even the way we grieve
Mm-hmm.
is accepting the mystery of the loss
Mm-hmm.
and embracing that, but just the unknowing of the whys.
Mm-hmm.
Why did this happen? And the unknowing in this was, well, it's the black and white was, well, it's all going to be better now. It's like, so his point was, is that what he sees a lot is people want to put a bow on it.
Right.
Everything needs to be wrapped up in a nice little package and a bow put on it. And he's like, that's not actually the way it works.
Right.
And
Right.
the reality of the grieving is not putting a bow on it. And sometimes
Right.
it's opening the box and looking in and being able to, and that wasn't his exact words, but it was really an inward focus as opposed to making it all look perfect on the outside.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if that's
Yeah.
kind of a little bit what we're talking about here is that our ability to embrace
so.
the mystery is in that same category.
I mean, I think so. I think we've talked a lot about acceptance. Am I willing to accept what's the reality before me, even if I disagree, or even if I think God should have done something different? Yes, to get to acceptance involves the going through the entire grieving cycle.
Can I ask a question? And not
Yeah.
to over interrupt. I'm actually interested now that I think about it, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to lose this thought.
Huh.
Have you ever seen a case where somebody came to you and said, God told me he's going to heal me and then that actually did happen? And the reason why I'm mentioning it is it's because it kind of goes against the mystery piece here. Is like, it's the
Yeah.
idea that I'm told this is how it's going to turn out. Because I'm thinking about your own case. You're an 18-year cancer survivor.
Mm-hmm.
You've
19,
had
baby.
19. That's right. I'm sorry. I passed an anniversary year.
I had to.
That was one of your
Correct.
corrections, wasn't
Jack
it, for the
and
website?
yeah. See, Jack's nodding.
I had to look over here. It's like,
Jack knows.
and so as I think about what you have still had to embrace, even though
Yeah.
you've miraculously are sitting here
Yeah.
today, you've had to all along still embrace the unknown. You weren't given Peter, you're going to be healed. Everything's fine. Every day you get up and it's I have another day.
Right.
You don't get,
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some people. I don't think it's a lot. I think it's rare.
I don't mean to say, so I just be clear,
No,
I don't mean to
yeah.
say that that's not possible.
Right.
I'm asking if you've ever seen it. And the reason why I'm saying that is I
Yeah.
think it might be really rare to not have the unknowing, as opposed to saying, not trying to make a theological state that, well, God never tells somebody. I'm actually asking, in your experience, you've been in cancer
Yeah.
support for 17 years now, or
Mhm.
18 years. Is it 18 years now?
17 for
17
cancer
years.
support group. Yeah.
Have you seen it? And if the answer is yes, how often then? A bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're kind of pinning me down a little bit, and
Okay.
this is what I will say.
Yeah.
Many times when people have a cancer diagnosis and they're going through treatment, and they have the statistics out there, and the statistics say 80 to 90% of the people survive this, and this person survives it,
I
right?
got you.
Is it still an answer to prayer? Yes, I believe it. Were they transformed by the journey? Sometimes, yes. But for instance, in my case,
I'm actually thinking now in more of the cases where somebody's been given a terminal
right.
diagnosis.
So in my case, the research, when I had the 14 surgery in 2015, the research at that time, because all they had was chemotherapy to treat this cancer, was a 5% survival rate.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically said, and then I went 2 years, and then in 2017 they said just go home and pass. There's your chance of survival is basically nil. And I just want to say this about the mystery of God. When I went home to do that journey, is there was a gentleman who was very well known with Ravi Zachariah doing apologetics. His name was Nabil Quresh, and he was a young man, 32-year-old, and he had written "Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus," and millions were selling. He just had a baby girl, and he had just been diagnosed with stomach cancer, and the doctors gave him 1 year, right? So I said to the Lord, you're definitely going to heal Nabil, and I'll gladly go be with you at this point. I've lived my life. My 6 kids are grown up. I felt good about where I was at that time. I mean, I still struggled with sadness and fear and those things, but I'm like, I get it that you're going to heal Nabil. Well, he passed exactly 1 year later after that diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I've heard of cases where the person had like a stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnosis and they lived. But I haven't actually I don't know if I've met any of those people.
I was
but
ready to say that.
I've heard about it.
I just got a text this morning from a good friend of yours and mine.
Mm-hmm.
His sister passed away from pancreatic cancer months ago, and he just sent me a note saying, hey, one of his close friends passed of pancreatic cancer today.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both know Jack, our friend here, died of pancreatic cancer. There's so many cases of this.
Well, my buddy Jeff just passed a couple weeks ago from it also.
Right. And I don't know of a single person personally that has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that has survived. And I don't say that as it can't happen. I'm actually just saying.
Well, I would qualify it with stage 4.
Yes,
because there's been the Whipple procedure and other surgical procedures where people have lived. But we did have someone in our cancer support group. I called her my tough German broad, but she was a wonderful Christian lady of German origin. She was just a great person, and she lived 4 years with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, that seems highly unusual.
And Linda, who was on our podcast,
yep,
I think it was 2 years with stage 4.
Yeah,
pancreatic. So.
It's not. We're not actually trying to make a theological statement. I don't think we are about pancreatic cancer. Or it's the point. I think it was in the situation. There's great mystery as to the whys, and what led us into this is that. And I take it. My mom, passed from lung cancer. That it relapsed from breast cancer, and so. But I remember that same thing that people came and tried to put certainty.
Right.
On, hey, your mom's going to be healed. And my mom passed just a few weeks from that point in time. And so, when people try to come put certainty on something, there's a concept, and we've talked about it a bit on this podcast. It's like using God's name in vain is giving false promises that you say are attached to God. That's using God's name in vain.
Right.
So much of the time we think about hearing that as cuss words or something like that. But the reality is using God's name in vain is God told me, and here's what it is for you.
Yeah.
And I don't say that's not the point of our podcast so much, but it really is highlighting something about our inability to set in mystery, even when it's not true.
It's happened to me where people have prayed over me and said, okay, it's all resolved, the issue that I was having. And I had surgery, and the doctor said the complete opposite. It was terrible. And, yes, there's this almost like this temptation or yearning to like predict something that
Put a bow.
uncertainty. Yeah, put a bow. I'm just going to say this. I was as surprised as anyone else when my tumor disappeared.
Yeah.
I was like, what? What is, in fact, I'm the one that said immunotherapy. Wow. And my doctor, my surgeon said, no, this is God.
Have you had somebody come tell you you're done for, Peter?
I don't know. Probably.
Well, you understand what I'm asking, why I'm asking
Yeah.
the question?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not a bow.
Right.
It's like
as
somebody
that.
coming to
Oh,
burn
okay.
the president.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
Peter, you're not going to make it. You got, my point is like this is what God's telling me or something like
Yeah.
that. It's almost always the opposite case where people are coming to put a bow on it to take the mystery out. And it's the words you might hear when you're grieving great loss is everything's going to be okay.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. And the thing that I love about Scazzero's teaching on this is that pain, failure, and disappointment can actually be one of the greatest events in our lives to bring us into dependence on Christ and intimacy with Jesus, where I am happiest. And I'm the first, when someone has a painful issue going on in their lives, I'm the first to say, Lord, heal, deliver, bring free, whatever it is. But if God's going to do what God's going to do, and I'm the first to say, there's something else going on here,
Yeah, let me give an opposite case. I'll use
Okay.
an example from me recently. It's not cancer related, but I was, I want to think about it from the opposite angle. And what I mean by the opposite angle is so much of the time we want to put a bow on something and we want to put certainty around it. And so, and I had really got caught up in the story of Elijah recently, and I've gone in and out of it a bunch. And I was really fascinated by the story of, and I've shared this with you even before, but the story of how Elijah was provided for. So Elijah was, he had basically pronounced judgment on Israel, and it wasn't going to rain for a long period of time, and there was going to be a drought, and that's exactly what happened. And God had told him to go to this brook, and he could drink from the brook, and ravens provided. And before long, the brook dried up because it hadn't rained for so long. And as the brook was drying up, God asked Elijah to go to a widow in his arch enemy's hometown, which in that case was Jezebel. Jezebel was out to kill him, and her hometown, I think it was Zarephath or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's supposed to go find a widow, and this widow would provide for him. Now, the crazy part about it, so God asked Elijah to go to the poorest person in his enemy's hometown, and that's who's going to meet his need. Now, if you think about it, it's so counterintuitive to any request that would be made of you. And Elijah embraced the mystery of that, and he got up and went. And sure enough, there's a widow there, and
enemy, and also she was a Gentile too, right?
Yes. This was not among the Jewish people. That's right.
So it's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
So he's in a foreign place,
Yeah.
and so, she does meet his need but God miraculously provides through her. She's picking up sticks for a last meal, and in picking up sticks for the last meal for her and her son because they're starving to death because of the drought.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Hey, give me something to drink and then to eat." And she's like, "We're eating our last meal." And he's like, "Hey, if you do this, God's going to meet your need," and that's exactly what happens. Is she feeds him, and her flour and oil doesn't run dry. And then her son passes by sickness at a later point in time. And it's such a great story because she actually thinks that it's her narrative is that God's there to curse her because she's such a great sinner. And God in his mercy had sent the greatest prophet in Israel to meet her in her greatest need. And he heals her son, brings him back to life. And now she believes, she understands this God. She had to go through this great trial. And so But she had had a narrative, this negative narrative that was
Yeah.
playing to bring certainty without
Mhm.
mystery to this.
Mhm.
And I just really thought it's such a great story. And as I had embraced it, and I was thinking about our own needs, and God was just like, I just sensed him saying, that's exactly how I'm going to provide for you here.
Mm.
And I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
So,
Yeah.
and then it hit me later on. It's like, oh, that might be a good sign that that's actually true because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so that's the journey.
I
It's like the,
Yeah.
hey, if it's coming from God, it probably will look counterculture, counterintuitive.
Right.
It won't be a bow wrapped on top of it that makes it look, you got to lean into something hard. And he's going to ask you to do some things that are a crisis of your belief, that you have to
Right.
step into this
Right.
great unknowing, I think is
Yeah.
what we're talking about. If you want to experience God, you have to step into the unknowing. If you want to experience peace, you have to wade into the unknowing.
There's that Chinese story that Scazzaro quotes, but it's that,
Yeah, I
remember
wanted to
that
quote
they're
that too,
living on
yes.
the frontier, a father and a son. The son's horse goes off and comes back with a beautiful stallion, and all the neighbors said, "Isn't that wonderful?" And the father's like, "How do you know this isn't a tragedy?" And the son's riding the new stallion, falls and breaks his leg or hip, whatever it is, and the father and the neighbor said, "Oh, this is a tragedy." And the father's like, "Well, how do you know this isn't a blessing?" The gist of the story is that an invading army comes to the frontier, and 8 out of 10 of the young men have to go and fight and are killed. And the son was home with his dad, because he was, disabled. And the point of the story is we don't know how God's working behind the scenes. That's why I love the whole tapestry concept. It's huge for me because underneath the tapestry, you see chaos, threads going every which way. Turn it over, it's a beautiful picture. So the question for me is this, including the cancer journey: am I willing to surrender and submit to God's actions, what he's doing, even though I don't understand it?
Yeah.
I don't see any good in it. Let's just say, am I willing to accept the fact that God may be doing something mysterious and very special?
Yes, I'll add one piece to that.
Yeah.
And it may be bigger than you.
Yep.
And so, and I say that not because one of the parts of the unknowing that I love is it's so easy for us to get caught up in our space-time continuum of understanding. And sometimes things don't play out for a few centuries. It may seem really
Right.
crazy. But understanding that as you're embracing the unknowing, that it's not that by embracing the unknowing that everything's going to turn out and look perfect in your lifetime or whatever that's happened there.
Right.
It is recognizing that there's a lot more mystery that's going on than we can realize. And sometimes we don't understand till much later. And
I mean, I think you use the example of Job, and I think about this man that lost his family, his business, his assets, everything. And he's sitting in a heap of his own, like, skin that was flaking off, like his own body that was smelly. And he's outside of the camp area, and
Yeah.
he's just sitting there in his hole in this pile of whatever. And what was going on in his mind? I know he had depression. He said, "Wish I had never been born." I know he didn't understand, and he had those feelings of, I'm sure, sadness and anger and fear, those things. And I think the story for me of Job is he didn't walk away from God.
Yeah, the temptation was to curse God and die.
Yes, and he didn't do that.
And he didn't do that. He had great questions,
Mm-hmm.
but he had to live in the great unknowing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
those who came and brought certainty,
Mm-hmm.
God's words were really harsh to them.
Yeah.
They've sinned. And he asked Job to make a sacrifice for them because what they had done, the words that they had spoke were basically using God's name in vain.
I mean, it's a huge lesson for me, Sean, as I visit somebody who's suffering. Really, I think about those 3 friends and I'm thinking, don't give an answer. Don't put a bow on it. Don't give us, just sit there with this person, say you're sorry, and be there. Be a non-anxious presence with that
Yeah.
person.
That's what was so cool about listening to this chaplain who's working as a chaplain in a hospital who's seeing death over and over. And he was talking about sitting there with a family and everybody was giving answers and he felt like he was just a bump.
Yeah.
And he felt as if, why was he even there? And then later on, he found out, hey, that's exactly what the people needed was presence. And that was something that stuck out to me. And it's a recent, I've been redoing the emotionally healthy relationships lessons. And one of the sayings, and a buddy of mine repeated it to me yesterday, is like, the closest thing to love, to being loved, is being listened to, in a sense of demonstrating great love, is to be listened to. And we interpret it by, let's take the mystery out and give a pat answer at times. And I think for us to just close this episode out today is just, I think what we're encouraging isn't that there's no hope or that there's not good answers or that there are things that aren't, beautiful bows that happen at the end. It's when you're at this point of uncertainty, the call isn't to put a bow on it. The call is to wade into it. And there is mystery. And because there's mystery, there's almost beauty to life because of the mystery. There's something really beautiful about mystery. If everything was known and everything was packaged up in that way, life wouldn't look like it does now. And so it's living in that mystery is where there's real meaning, I think, is the point. And if you can embrace the mystery, then you can probably find peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's, I'll just add that. So I've been over to Israel several times, and I remember one of the tour guys said, that our kind of Western culture always wants to have an answer or a bow on it. And he was just saying that we believe in a good God, and yet there was a Holocaust. And so he said, that's a tension. We don't try to figure it out. We discuss it, but we don't try to solve it. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to wade into this.
Yeah,
but we're at time today, so we do
Okay.
thank you for listening. I think hopefully you got a flavor of where we're at and really thinking about mystery and the importance of wading into it. And
I think we should have a part 2.
all right, that sounds good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
We're just saying, hey, we recognize that there is great mystery, and today, that's not a bad thing. That is actually a call for something to walk in and to embrace mystery today. And we'll talk more in the next episode. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Blessings.